Today is July 11th, 2016. I had a cardiac cryoablation done on July 1st. And I thought it might be helpful if I got some of my experience recorded. For those of you who might be contemplating this procedure, I realize every case is somewhat unique, but I can tell you my experience so far and what I expect to see going forward. I'm 66 years old. My AFib was diagnosed when I was 58, so 8 years ago. And along with AFib, they detected two other irregular heartbeats. One was atrial flutter, typical atrial flutter, and the other was atypical atrial flutter. Both of those occur in the right atrium and are easier to resolve. We first tried a cardioversion. That was an experience. You know, they hook you up to electric paddles and bang. What I noted about that was they give you a drug that knocks you out for about 2 minutes. It's amazing. You just go to sleep and wake up, and it's done. But the cardioversion helped for about 6 hours. And then it was back into, my heart was back into arrhythmia. And so the next approach was medication. I take flecainide, and they also gave me diltiazem. And that worked sort of, but mostly I had this very erratic heartbeat. So a couple of years into that, we decided we would do, well, let's see, 6 years ago, decided we would do a catheter ablation, a radiofrequency ablation, to at least get rid of the flutter, thinking the flutter was a trigger for the AFib, which is a more serious condition. So that was done as part of the Kaiser system down at their center in San Jose. We drove down for the day that the procedure was done. I just got back in the car with my wife and daughter and came home that day. And my heart was much better. It took probably 2 weeks to heal. Most of the wounding is actually in your groin, where they run the catheter up the femoral vein, and so you have to be very careful for a couple of weeks, kind of walking about gingerly, not putting any stress on your groin. But that healed up very well, and anyways, was better. And so then the drugs could control the AFib much better. And for the last 6 years, that's exactly what I've been doing. You know, I've been on flecainide and a blood thinner, first Coumadin and now Eliquis, which certainly is really preferable. It's more expensive by far, but it's a preferable drug, and it was keeping my AFib pretty well controlled. The main trigger for me was exercise. When I would get out and run or cycle, just getting my heart rate up to 115 or so, maybe 120, which is really not very high, it would kick into fibrillation and just jump instantly to 160 or more. And I think it's probably the flecainide that kept it from going higher. But this was pretty much not something I liked. Exercise is something I do like. And so we started thinking seriously probably a year ago. I met with the cardiologist, Dr. Arash Ariana, in the Sutter system. And he is sort of one of the pioneers of cryoablation, where they ablate by freezing tissue rather than burning it. I know he's taught all over the world, taught this procedure all over the world, and he said I'm a good candidate for it. I'm still young enough. The AFib is just paroxysmal, which means it's, just from time to time. I will say my quality of life was quite good as long as I was reasonably sedentary. I would go for weeks, months, just kind of basically, indefinitely without any AFib, but I had to be pretty sedentary. And I could feel that. I'm at an age at 66, you're sedentary and you can feel your body decline pretty fast. And it's like, this was not something I wanted. So he said, you're a good candidate. You don't have any other markers for AFib. AFib is typically triggered by obesity or diabetes or other underlying heart conditions, mitral valve problems, whatever. And I don't have any of that. Mine comes from my dad. It's genetic. He was troubled by it. His big sister had atrial fibrillation, and it's just in my genes. And so a few months ago, he said, okay, let's do it. You know, he said it's not going to get better by itself. It will tend to get worse as you age. I could feel a decline in my body. And it's like, let's just do this now. And so did the procedure, went into the hospital. My wife drove me on July 1st. Was there much of the day before they got to me. They had some other patients. I probably should say I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 170 pounds. My blood pressure is low. My cholesterol is low. So I don't have any other conditions. I think this helped in making this decision. But anyway, went in, and when you do a procedure like this is a much heavier weight procedure than the original flutter procedure was. You sort of just abandon your body to them. The nurse who comes in, you know, and just shaved my body from my neck to my knees. Doctors come in and poke and probe in and around my groin. And it's like, okay, just let them do what they're going to do. It's important. This is their work. And it's kind of a funny experience. But anyway, they had me fully prepped, pasted electrical leads all over my body. I'm sure I had 24 wires glued to my body, both front and back, and wheeled me into the operating room. And there, you know, there's a big 80-inch TV monitor, and they're getting input from fluoroscopy cameras. They have real-time 3D mapping. There's all kinds of imaging going on. And of course, the doctor's going to work by watching that monitor. He's seeing inside a beating heart. And that was all entertaining. It's like, I kind of wished I could be awake for this, because this looks like this would be cool to observe. But there's no way that could happen for a number of reasons. One is I had to remain absolutely still. And so to do that, they wanted to knock me out. The other is I probably would not have found it a very pleasant experience. You know, I had a fluoroscopy camera down my throat for several hours. Completely unaware of this, of course. I was sleeping. But anyway, the procedure is basically they go in through the femoral vein in the groin. They thread catheters up into your heart, into the right atrium. Then to access the left atrium, they make what we call a septal, forgot the word, something puncture, to go, actually puncture a hole from the right side of your heart to your left through that membrane that separates them. This is a self-healing membrane. When they withdraw the catheter later on, that hole they've made will almost always just close itself up within days or weeks. I asked the doctor going in if there was going to be blood, you know, moving from the right atrium to the left because they'd made a hole in it. And he said no. He said there's a pressure differential between these two atria, and that doesn't happen, which was interesting to me. Anyway, they go in there with, well, I don't exactly know all the things they had. I believe they had an electrical probe. Its purpose was to trigger fibrillation so they can see where it's coming from. Then I don't know if they had a camera as part of those catheters. And then they had the cryo balloon catheter, which is a deflated balloon. Once they move it into position, they'll inflate it. It's about 23 to 28 centimeters big. And once that's in position, they will fill it with supercooled nitrogen, I believe. and cool it to about 150 degrees and hold it in position. And my understanding is that one of the tricky things when they've been developing cryoablation is knowing how cold to make it and how long to hold it in place. It could get too cold. If it's not cold enough, it's not going to ablate. If it's not held in place long enough, it's not going to ablate. But if it's held there too long or it's too cold, it could damage things besides what they're trying to damage. And so that apparently, it's called the dosing of this. And so that was kind of interesting. But anyway, they found what they expected to find, and that's that all four pulmonary veins, the pulmonary veins are the four veins that come into your left atrium from your lungs. That's where the triggers for AFib are normally found, and they found that all four of those veins were firing. And so they will go one by one, find the vein, and this is all done on monitors, position the cryoballoon right at the, right where the vein enters the atrium, and inflate it, seal it off, and freeze it. And in freezing it, they're destroying a small ring of tissue around there, and in destroying that tissue, the electric signal can no longer pass through and get to the heart. My understanding is on the monitor, they're seeing my heartbeat, and as each of these veins was ablated, that crazy, wild, scribbly little kid heartbeat would get smoother and smoother and smoother, and more normal. And they then, once that was all withdrawn, they then discovered a fifth source of electricity in my left atrium that was coming from the atrium itself. And so they opened up my left femoral vein, and they threaded a radio frequency laser into that one, and they got the source of that and burned it and thereby ablated it. He also told me while they were in there that they checked the flutter ablation that had been done 6 years ago and found that it was holding, meaning the electricity had not reconnected. So that was great. And that was the procedure. I remember coming to when I was being wheeled back into the recovery area, and there was a fair amount of commotion around. And my wife said she saw them withdraw foot and a half long catheter from my left femoral vein. She said, I just watched them just pull this thing out. And I was like, wow, okay. I didn't see that either, although, stuff like that is interesting to me. And off to recovery I went. I'm laying in recovery. I was thinking this would be similar to the flutter thing. I should say the procedure was about 3.5 hours from the time they began until I wound up in the recovery room. So it's a fairly long procedure. And they have to, of course, be very, very careful. The risks of this procedure are, of course, stroke, which is absolute worst case to me. Last thing in the world I want is a stroke. There's a risk of heart attack. There's risk of infection. There's risk of damaging something you need, like your permanent pacemaker. The sinus node, and then having to use a mechanical pacemaker. Those are all extremely rare. I asked Dr. Ariana before this began, I said, how about pulmonary vein stenosis? And that's where the pulmonary veins would actually, in reaction to the freezing, would get closer, would close up. They'd constrict permanently. And he said he has never seen it happen. He's heard of it. He's done thousands of these procedures, he said, and he has never once seen that happen. So I considered that a pretty slight risk, but it was risky, and it was risky for elective surgery, and it was risky because well, it was managed. I mean, the AFib was managed as something I could live with. Uh, but anyway, back to the recovery room. Um, Again, like the flutter, most of the recovery was because of the wounding to the groin. When they put the catheters in through your groin, they puncture the skin and puncture the femoral vein and then run the catheters up. That puncture, when you come back, I mean, you're packed in gauze and bandages, and you know how that is, so it's, and you're all black and blue. And so, I mean, it looks like you've just been smashed to bits. In reality, the puncture is about the size of a knitting needle. It's really very small. And as it heals, over the days that it's healing, you're pulling off the band-aids or the bandages, and the scabbing begins to go away, and you realize this is really a very tiny opening that they made in both sides, and I'm pretty sure that they will both close up with. There probably won't be any marks at all, and if there are, they'll be trivial. Anyway, but they don't stitch those back together, and so the first 6 hours, you're just lying there flat in bed, your legs are out, and that was hard. Your body, after a while, you're not moving, and so your body starts to cramp up. I originally thought we were going to be going home, and it's like, no way is that going to happen. I sort of feel like I was hit by a buffalo. I could feel heaviness in my chest. My throat was very sore. This is because of the camera that was in my throat. They had given me, before the procedure began, they gave me a massive injection of blood thinners. And then when it was all done, they gave me a big dose of anti-blood thinners, basically vitamin K, and put me back on my normal Eliquis blood thinner the following day. They also prescribed, the doctor also prescribed a two-week course of something for my throat. I don't know if it's an antibiotic or what, but I'm just taking it without really paying much attention to it. Anyway, by midnight, I could start to move a little bit. The nurse would come in and check to see if there was any bleeding in and around my groin, see if there was any hematosis, under the skin, all that kind of stuff. And didn't sleep much that night. Every hour I would be, awakened by someone needing to come in and check me out. But I could move my legs a little bit, like put my knees up. That was very helpful. So it was not a comfortable night. I mean, it's not awful or anything, but just not a comfortable night. And next morning, well, it was noon the next day. So really 18 hours, I could go home. And they wheeled me out and just walked very, very gingerly to the car and got in, and, my wife and daughter drove me home. And straight to bed. I mean, just laid out in the bed and just keep my legs flat and, feel for any kind of lumps and bumps and signs of bleeding from the groin. It's, I asked him before this all began, I said, how long before, I can be up and around and doing stuff? And he says, 2 to 3 days. And it's like, not a chance. It's not going to happen. It was a full week before I was really moving around at all. Once I started moving, it's pretty good, but I mean, very gingerly at first. Again, just trying to make sure your groin stays, sane, basically. All black and blue. No real pain. There's tenderness if you touch the area. But it's just part of post-op, and it's something you have to do. It's not fun, but it's not terrible. Anyway, so then what? During the week, I would feel probably by the third day or fourth day, my throat was fine. I found myself for the first several days often short of breath. It's like just, I'm breathing along fine, and all of a sudden it's hard to breathe. It's so you just go slowly through that and breathe, and it just passes after a few seconds. I could feel intermittent heaviness in my chest. And it was like, well, they really got in there. And I mean, it's been frozen, it's been burned, it's been jostled around. Uh, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. Anyway, so this is now 11 days. Dr. Ariana, when I was leaving the hospital, he said, here's the thing. He said, there is what we call a 3-month blanking period uh, where the heart is kind of readjusting itself. The inflammation is going away, the scars are forming, any openings are closing. And he said you can expect any number of different heart rhythms to show up in this period. You could be back into AFib. There could be other sensations, and just go with it. He said it'll sort itself out, and in 3 months, you should be completely free of any arrhythmia. And so I came home with that prep in mind. And so I would feel different things going on in my heart. And I was kind of beat up enough to not really care a whole lot. But anyway, so on about the 6th day, I felt good enough to walk. And I was, again, walking kind of gingerly, but it wasn't bad. And by the 7th day, it's like, all right, I'm ready to go outdoors and walk. And so I did. And I live in a cul-de-sac, so my wife said, don't please go beyond the cul-de-sac. So it's like, okay. And so I just walked round and round and round and round the cul-de-sac very slowly, probably a 2.5 to 3 mile an hour walk. But I just kept walking. And before I was done, I'd walked 2.5 miles in circles in front of my house. And it really felt good to do that. That did not elevate my heart rate beyond 80, which you would expect. But that was that day. The next day, I felt all day, I felt kind of this super low level hum in my heart. And the best I could describe it was like it was if you had your fingers, on wet and on a battery, just that low level electric buzz that would be moving through your body. Felt like that all day. I would take my heart rate and it would be steady. And by the way, one of the most exciting things about this is that the morning after my recovery, I'm in the recovery room and they have a heart monitor. They have an EKG on me and I'm looking up and I'm seeing this beautiful, perfect heart rhythm. Just that classic, beat, beat, beat. It was thrilling. I haven't seen that in 10 years. It was like, wow, that's a perfect heartbeat. And any of you with AFib know if you've had that EKG that your line looks like a little kid scrawled it, and none of that. It was just this perfect. It's like, love that. Anyway, back to walking. Next day, I went out again, round and round and round the court, another 2.5 miles. And that felt a little stronger, a little better. Next day, I did it again. And let's see, my heart's been steady, which is exciting, but I haven't elevated it past 103, 105, which, it's pretty low. My resting rate, by the way, is about 60. Yesterday, I went out and, escaped our little cul-de-sac and did my normal walk-run route, except I ran almost not at all, but I walked fast, about 4 mile an hour pace, like I normally do. And in a couple spots, I actually broke into a slow jog and then checked my heart rate. And it was up to 120. Little slow jog up a grade. And so I'd walk another quarter mile and do another slow jog for maybe 50 yards or 100 yards. And then same thing again, same thing again. And when I did that for the fourth or fifth time on the walk yesterday, I went up a very small incline at a very slow jog, and I felt a little bit out of breath. And so I stopped and took my heart rate, and it was 120, and then suddenly jumped to 160, 170, 175, just instantly made that jump. And so clearly it was in fibrillation. And so, which is typical, this is how I would normally experience this when I go out for walks, runs, and bike rides. And so I just stopped and let it come down. And it did. After about 45 seconds, it just dropped like to 120, 110, 100, 90, 85, and stopped. And so I just continued my walk. Only I didn't jog anymore. So I came home and made a note that my heart had gone into fibrillation. I remembered what the doctor had said. You could expect this sort of thing. Today I went out. Anyway, walked 5 miles. Today I went out and did it again. Got up this morning, made the same route, faster still, made the same jogs faster. And after the fourth or fifth one, the place where it had fibrillated yesterday, I checked my heart rate and it was 115, 116. It was not in fibrillation, which was, all right, this is cool. Anyway, so that's where I am today. I mean, this is where I've come today. It's been 11 days. So this is not very far into it. And I probably should, kind of keep this updated as the next 3 months go on, even possibly the next year. But I have really high hopes for a great outcome here. I would love to be fully free of it. He said our goal is to have you completely free of fibrillation ever again. Whether or not that's possible, really nobody knows. I mean, the heart is really a complex organ. I mean, it's just a fantastic piece of work. And as much as they understand, they don't really understand everything. And this is, the cryoablation is state of the art today, 2016, 2020, that might be different. Who knows? But I have really high hopes that we're going to have an excellent outcome. He said his goal is to have me off of meds within 90 days. I'm not in a hurry to have that done or not have that done. If it's safe to be off of meds, awesome. And we'll do it, But to me, that's a side benefit. What I love is being able to get out there and move my body and work and elevate the heart rate and have it be steady. I mean, this is just, it's thrilling, really. So that's my experience so far. And thanks for listening. I hope this helps. I'm pretty busy. I have a fairly demanding job, so I probably won't be having time to answer questions you may have. But I hope at least this little report about my experience helps you decide on your own. Thanks.